In the mental health field, too often, we've made it seem as if it's just in your head.
The landlord can hijack the rent by 20%. That impacts people's mental health.
Can't have a profit-driven mental health care system if we want our people to be connected and healthy.
So hey everybody, welcome back to It's Not Just in Your Head. I'm Max, a therapist. We've got Harriet, therapist, and we have two other awesome therapists, Jackie and Elizabeth, who are going to introduce themselves and their involvement with a very special and awesome labor union out here on the West Coast. So maybe we could go Jackie, then Elizabeth. Can you introduce yourselves?
Sure. Hi, my name is Jackie Schalit. I'm a marriage family therapist. I work at UCSF Benioff Children's Hospital, Oakland, in the early childhood mental health program, and I'm a shop steward with NUHW and on the executive board.
Will you define those initials for our listeners?
National Union of Healthcare Workers.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And we recently became, our department became unionized about 3.5 years ago.
Awesome. Thanks, Jackie. And Elizabeth?
Hi, I'm Elizabeth White. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, and I work at Kaiser Permanente, which is the large HMO health maintenance plan in the West Coast. I work in Southern California, and I am also shop steward for the National Union of Healthcare Workers in my local psychiatry clinic. We have been part of NUHW for almost 10 years now with part of the founding to create a new vision for a labor union that is progressive and is also trying to make mental health a civil rights issue of our time.
What do you mean by that?
Well, I think in our campaign with Kaiser Permanente, we realized that corporate healthcare is not following the law of mental health parity, and that our bodies, are one. We need to treat mental health the same as physical health, and that's the basis of federal parity laws and enforcement at the state level that we have engaged in this ongoing struggle to force Kaiser to follow the law.
So Harriet and I might get y'all to rewind a little bit to elaborate on things like either acronyms or concepts. So mental health parity. I understand that to be basically making it so that mental health is on par with importance and treatment by whether hospitals or insurance companies as physical health care. Is that what you mean, or is there another meaning?
Yeah, I mean that's a beginning point. In the past, mental health care had been limited by insurance companies to maybe 20 visits or pre-existing conditions, or not provided with a clear guideline about how often patients are supposed to be seen. And then, so the law had been passed at the federal level, but states were slow to enforce it and create their own enforcement laws, so that someone that has a bipolar disorder is given the same treatment as, for example, someone who had cancer.
That's really important because there has been in some sectors, it's a very class-oriented. For a lot of working class people, you don't get mental health care unless you're crazy, unless you're really gone, rather than you need help in life. And it's I think we have a model of mental health care, meaning that we need help in trying to deal with life because the social, political, and personal conditions under which we live are very difficult, which is very different from a medical model. You're sick and we cure you. So that it's different, but it's just as important. And I think that's so important that you're insisting that those laws be enforced so that people can cope with life, which is increasingly difficult in the United States.
Yeah, it also makes me think about kind of the real importance of destigmatizing mental health treatment. And I think it's really what we need right now, to let folks know that it's just as important to get your mental health or that type of suffering treated as if you have cancer or something like that.
Right.
Yeah.
In some cities, like in Minneapolis, they now, if there's a mental health problem, the way there often is if somebody's freaking out because they don't have their meds, they used to send the cops who would end up shooting someone or hurting them. And now they send teams of social workers because they know that those are social and personal problems. They are not criminal offenses that need to be addressed by cops who are heavily armed. And that's being considered and, of course, fought by the police union in New York. Since police aren't allowed to unionize it, they call themselves the Policemen's Benevolent Association, which is quite shocking. But they are fighting it tooth and nail, even though it's obviously crucial. Because if someone's freaking out, he or she needs to be talked down and helped, not pinned down and shot. Been too many shootings of mental health patients in the United States, so they're beginning to wake up and change, and I see you as a very important part of that change.
Can I ask, do you two work in the same facility, or are you in same hospital, different hospitals?
No, I work at UCSF Benioff Children's Hospital, Oakland, up in Oakland, California.
Right, and I work for Kaiser Permanente.
Oh, you're different. Okay, I'm so sorry. For some reason, I thought you were both Kaiser. When I think of NUHW, and I think of like Kaiser. Like I feel like the biggest campaigns I've heard about are Kaiser, so it's like all Kaiser.
Well, Jackie has a great story. I mean, she works for the Children's Hospital that got partnered with the University of California, San Francisco Medical School, a medical campus.
Yeah.
So Jackie has a great story to tell about our efforts to organize that entire hospital.
Ooh.
I was kind of previewing that with Harriet. It is an interesting story. So 4 years ago, the day after Trump was elected, we got called into a staff meeting and was told by our director that the administration at Children's, who had recently partnered with the UCSF, was now the most important thing they wanted to focus on was inpatient hospital beds. And they began to draw like concentric circles around like, this is important, inpatient hospital beds. And the next level is, outpatient surgery stuff. And like, we found ourselves at in the very last circle of importance, whereas we're a community mental health program that serves very young children, birth to 7, who've been impacted by trauma or substance abuse or incarceration, really preventative mental health. So the hospital's like, we are not that important to us. And that really ignited a lot of, ignited us, and we became unionized, I think within like 3 months or something, like really fought hard and joined NUHW. And 4 years later, I still have a job, and we're still like pushing the hospital's administration to attend to the needs of the community in Oakland, not just the profits. So,
was your union effort resisted, or was there cooperation?
Well, obviously, it was resisted by the hospital, but I think the timing was really important. That we had a lot of the workers and the staff were very interested in working together to continue our work with the community and fight for our clients.
So we don't have to get too much into the weeds but I really love the sort of internal mechanics and logistics of organizing workplaces, like almost like a nerd that likes board games or something. I mean, if you have any, I don't know, interesting stories around that of like how, well, I guess one, like how, like why NUHW, maybe why not SEIU? And I know for a lot of listeners probably don't know about like the sort of the quote unquote civil war within SEIU and how NUHW formed, but like, why not other unions? Like, why NUHW? And then maybe even from there, like, how did y'all get trained Because as you probably know from that effort, like unionizing a workplace doesn't just happen. You don't just snap your fingers and then everybody's on board, right? It's like it's like this whole process. It's actually it's like having a part-time job at work that you're not getting paid for under the nose of the boss that you have to like do all the time, right? Like so.
Yeah.
Anyway, how did you start with NUHW and what did that actually look like on the ground?
Max, will you define SEIU for people who might?
Oh, sure. Please. Sorry. So SEIU stands for Service Employees International Union. Is that right?
Yes.
They're like a really, really big, like they're some people call them like the purple monster. Like they're like the IWW likes to call them the purple monster. They have a purple logo and they are an enormous healthcare union that's like national, maybe international in level and scale. Tons and tons of hospitals and some other sectors. And NUHW actually basically broke away. Well, I'll let y'all tell the story, but yeah, so that's SEIU, mostly a hospital workers union, as is NUHW. But anyway, Jackie, yeah, how did y'all end up with NUHW as opposed to say SEIU?
Yeah, there were other departments or units of NUHW within our hospital already.
Oh,
And so
okay.
we were a couple of social workers in my department was familiar with NUHW, so they came to us. I think the reason why we were successful in unionizing is because of the feeling of that NUHW has of having a democratic union, that we're a part of the process. We're really involved in it. And I know that for sure that's why I became a shop steward, and now I'm on the executive board. And it was so interesting. I was thinking the other night, like, have I been in a union before NUHW? And I I realized I was in SEIU when I was working at the county several, I don't know, like 18, 19 years ago before going to children's, but didn't feel a part of it at all.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
here I am now.
Can you maybe maybe to zoom out and just name this too, like because unions generally have been like pretty decimated over the last 50 years in the US, like most average people like either are not a part of a union and may not even know somebody that's part of a union, or like don't, like even if like if your postal worker is dropping off the mail or whatever, like you're not even thinking about, well, this person belongs to a union or whatever. So when you say like a democratic union in describing NUHW that way versus say, if you were part of SEIU, it sounds like you were sort of passively involved and like no one ever asked what you thought about anything, right? So that doesn't sound like a very democratic union. It's like, well, the union management maybe just like does stuff for you, but you just sort of exist for them or something, right? And you pay them dues. Like, what is the difference? Like how can you tell a union is more democratic versus not being very democratic?
Good question. I mean, I think that we're asked what we want to fight for, and like it's in that process that we bring people, varying issues to the table. So there's always a question of what do you want to fight for, and I think folks have a felt sense that their experience is important. So it's not like this is what we believe, the union staff, but they're asking us, what do you want to fight for? Like, what's important to you?
That's so important. It's sort of
Yeah.
the difference in New York of AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who went door to door to every single house that would let her in the Bronx and Brooklyn, which was the Bronx and Queens, which was her district, and asked people what they cared about, where they were, what they wanted her to fight for, whereas her Democratic predecessor just showed up once every 4 years for elections and lived in Virginia and sent his kids to a private school in Virginia, whereas Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez grew up there. And those were her people. And she went door to door asking, because that is democracy, not voting for an anonymous candidate who doesn't even know or care about you. And so it's really important. and that it's a smaller union that really fights for its people.
Mm-hmm.
There was an attempt to close hospitals. Cuomo has closed 20,000 public hospital beds in the past, not during COVID, but there were attempts at several hospitals to become co-ops so that the nurses and everyone else could keep their jobs. And SEIU would not cooperate. Democracy at Work was willing to help them, and the nurses' unions were all in, but SEIU did not cooperate. And I think in a big bureaucratic union, there is much less touch with average people, and that it is dangerous to be that way. And I can see why people joined you. It's a wonderful story.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, do y'all have, it sounds like maybe Elizabeth might have a little bit more of an insight being with NUHW longer, like that whole, because I think that story of that, how NUHW formed breaking off from SEIU, I think that's a really interesting story. If you have, I don't know, anything from personal experience, I don't know if you go that far back with it, Elizabeth, but if you just know anything about that.
I mean, I think that that one of the things that happen is, you're at a crossroads. So there, often in an activist life, there's these turning moments. There's these moments where you remember that you became, just empowered, or you became, quote, woke. You woke up. Whether it's like Jackie sitting in the room after the Trump being elected and seeing that we're not a priority. Or I remember sitting with some administrators that and having to take a bilingual test. I am a Spanish speaker, and I had to take a test, and I passed because I have training and experience. But when we were talking about this person, asked me to sign off on training when that it was 8 hours training, and they only gave me 2 hours of training, and the union didn't defend me. I mean, they said, what union? So I was completely powerless against the boss, so to speak, completely powerless. And when you realize you're powerless against a big boss like Kaiser, you know that you're going to lose. You're going to lose. Yeah. So that's when I think, based on some relationships that I trusted, you begin to meet people that say, we're not just in it for ourselves, but we're also in it for our patients. Because as a social worker, we look at the big picture, we look at the macro issues. And here I was serving patients that had paid for Kaiser insurance, that are working people. They run the city of Los Angeles. They drive the buses. They make the food. They take care of children. They clean the hotel rooms. So all of these individuals, these working people, men and women, were my patients, and their children were my patients. So you become touched with the fact that there's this injustice, because this health plan wasn't delivering the care. Patients were waiting 2 and 3 months, even 4 months for a return appointment. And it's fraud. They frauded what they were selling to the public, and no one is saying this is wrong. And we knew that it was wrong, and so the union said, we're going to help you with this. We're going to help force Kaiser to follow the law, because there was already these parity laws in place, but the state wasn't enforcing it. So the workers forced So these are moments where you just realize, like, it's worth the sacrifice, right? Of course, being a union leader and a steward, there's no compensation, but you feel the deep satisfaction that you are really changing not only individuals' lives, but systems. And that's where myself, as a social worker that's been trained both in policy and macro issues, really, really found a home. And it's like you fall in love. You fall in love. And that's where my journey has taken me.
Wow. Do you have any relationship to the mostly backward AFL-CIO, or are you completely independent? Or are you affiliated with
At
others?
the time we were affiliated, but we are not affiliated right now because we as a union have taken, more of a progressive stance, and
Mm-hmm.
I really can't comment too much on that because I'd have to, kind of reread, the story. But we associate with the progressive side of the labor movement. So we
Mm-hmm.
are good friends with unions. We support, the teachers' unions. We have collaborated in the past with the California Nurses Association.
Mm-hmm.
And we are very much involved with Unite Here, which is organized a lot of the hotel workers and organized workers in Las Vegas. We've also are really good friends with the International Association of Machinists, the IAM, that works in the Boeing plants, and they run the port of Los Angeles. So in our journey, we also have chosen issues that are really close to my own heart, so to speak. So issues around immigration, having had immigrant grandparents, I feel very strongly about that. And actually, my immigrant grandfather was able to make a living and afford a house because he was an SEIU janitor from Chicago, Illinois, where SEIU. Yeah. So also issues like single payer healthcare, gay and lesbian, trans rights, things that are part of a justice movement, a human justice movement, to have a better world.
That is so important because I think all over the United States, people are leaving a market-driven set of considerations like market-driven healthcare and trying to create a more just world in their separate areas. And I can't help but noticing that in Europe, one of the reasons they have much better working conditions, for example, the German metal workers just got not just a couple of months ago, got a 22-hour work week at the same pay so they could have work-life balance, something unknown here. But no union leader is allowed in Europe, or at least in France and Germany, to get any more money than the highest paid worker in her or his union. And they're all affiliated politically. So you choose a socialist union or a capitalist union, if that's your choice, or a communist union, or a union of communists and socialists or whatever, so that there is a political commitment wrapped up in the union.
Yeah, Harriet, it's so interesting that you say that because we in our Constitution have the president cannot make more than the highest worker in our union. Exactly.
Nice.
That's fair. So that
yes. And, also Jackie being from the Bay Area knows like in NUHW, National Union of Healthcare Workers, is very well known in the Bay Area because of our leader who has political dominance and well known throughout the Bay Area, Sal Roselli.
Yeah.
That's really important because it goes back to a radical tradition of democracy and worker power instead of a hierarchy. There's a guy named Frank Annunziato who wrote about how most unions, he had been a union leader in the hotel workers and bartenders and also the teachers union on the East Coast. And he said that they're structured like a capitalist corporation selling services like collective bargaining and also other services like certain kinds of healthcare and a small bank, lending services, but that the whole organizational structure was structured like a capitalist corporation. And that makes all the difference. And I can see all these young unions refusing that structure, as well as the older one, the International Workers of the World, IWW. So this ramifies hugely in the society. Really does. Very important what they're doing. and it's part of a movement. All those wildcat strikes for teachers and nurses and so on. Really important.
Yeah, it's really inspiring to hear you, Elizabeth, talk about the sort of coalition of labor you're talking about in LA too, of like all the unions you just mentioned in with you as NUHW. And I mean, I'm wondering like what that actually looks like. Again, from the sort of the logistics of it, like, is it that you have different, I don't know if it would be stewards or board members or something. Is it different liaisons and reps that meet with other unions, or do y'all like participate in actions together, or does that question make sense? Like basically of what the collaboration looks like
yeah,
between
I mean,
all of you?
I think one of the powerful things that that workers have an opportunity to do is go on strike. And we've gone on several strikes against Kaiser. And in the process of going on strikes, we have folks, come to the strike line and speak. So that's an opportunity to have our members, like a rank and file member, understand that we stand with others, right? So I remember in one of our first strikes where we were young and scrappy, and I'm like the PR rep, and so we invited the person who was in charge of the benefit structure for the IAM, the International Association of Machinists. So he was in charge of like 14,000 longshoremen in the harbor, and they all had Kaiser insurance. So he came to a strike line and he said, I'm going to tell Kaiser, you better treat these workers right because we purchased your insurance, right? So, those are moments where my colleagues who are not as active as me understood that this is, we're part of a movement. Like those longshoremen, some of those individuals are patients, but more than that, they stand on the strike line with us. So that's, just a little personal story. We also are part of a coalition of faith and lay people. So, we have folks come here in LA. We have a community group coalition, and many large cities have that kind of coalition. We have the politicians that we've helped elect and then turn around, help us come to the strike line. We've had some great wins in Orange County. We've helped some of those politicians that are more progressive be elected in Orange County, which is south of Los Angeles County. Yeah. So
and a lot more conservative.
Yeah, well, we're trying to help turn it blue. It's kind of purple now, but the strike, as these short strikes are such a powerful organizing tool. People will come up to you after the strike who've never been political, have never done anything like that ever in their lives. They might have gone to an activist march, but for them to get on the strike line and chant and walk and raise their fist, such a powerful experience for them.
What would you say is different between, say, an activist march, whether like the Women's March or Black Lives Matter marches? Obviously very important kinds of actions. But what's the difference between those kinds of things and a labor strike?
Well, I think they have a lot of really important similarities. I do think that a labor strike will have a platform that's very clear, that we try to chant, and that we have talking points about what we want. And it's not just about wages or benefits. It's about the quality of our working lives, the quality of our working lives, and that we will not live a lie for a corporation, right? So that's a very unifying piece with these other movements, because aren't you on the strike line because African-American Black women have these high rates of mortality and pregnancy? Aren't you on the strike line because, your Latinx children are not getting the education they need? Aren't you on the strike line because people are discriminated based on their gender preference or their sexual preference at the workplace? So this becomes very powerful. And yes, we're on the strike line because we work hard and we want, to have a reasonable wage. But if you can help members understand that our fight is their fight and their fight is our fight, it becomes really transformative.
And, I think that
It's incredible.
So clearly by the unity and the participation of other workers, because, I have spent some time in France, and I was impressed that when the electrical workers go out, so do the subway workers and the gas and workers, and the whole place closes down. It's basically, because it's organized, it's a general strike. And it's saying to people like Macron who don't want to listen up, you can't do this. The same thing with the teachers, where all the teachers went on strike, and their preschool teachers are paid like regular teachers and are part of the teachers' unions. And so did the subway workers and the electrical and gas workers. So the whole place closed. You have a sense of the power of workers to determine a better life together. And that's what I'm really inspired to hear you say.
Yeah, I think also we've just, again, the leadership of Sal Roselli and our vice president, Sophia Mendoza, the type of organizers that they recruit are just stellar. These folks have gone on to build unions in other states, and they have learned so much, and they've been just outstanding group of progressive labor union professionals. They're basically tradespeople. This is what their life is going to be. So by having such careful hiring practices and then great retention practices of these workers, we have built a lot of depth. I'm sure Jackie can talk about the reps at Children's.
I completely agree, Elizabeth. I mean, it's this idea. I think the other thing that really makes me think about as you were speaking is like, you're not alone. Like, I know that for me and for other workers, and as a therapist too, like, it does really hard work. In order to be the best therapist that I can be, I need to feel supported in my working conditions. And that doesn't sometimes, that happens within my department, but within the general scheme of the company, UCSF, that doesn't happen. And I feel fully supported by the staff at NUHW. And it gives me more courage and more ability to feel like when I stand up and speak that I'm not alone. And I know that it really helps me be a better therapist.
Yes, I could see that. Also, then as a therapist, you can help your clients know that if they're active, they'll be less alone as they try to protect themselves and their livelihoods and each other. Some of their acute loneliness may be mitigated in solidarity.
I wanted to just say a quick, since you mentioned Sophia Mendoza, I just wanted to give a little kind of public shout out, because she's the first contact I ever had with a union organizer when I was trying to organize my workplace in Santa Barbara, like 3-4 years ago, with a couple of coworkers, and it didn't really pan out. Although I would say that spending years of salting that doesn't go anywhere is transformative in and of itself. But also just especially after learning about the ways, how SEIU is very different than NUHW, and how NUHW formed. I mean, I think Sophia really successfully embodied that very worker-centered, she didn't push us at all, you got to try this instead, you got to try that instead, you need to push your coworkers. It was a very you guys will figure it out kind of thing, if me or others were reaching out to her, like, well, how do I talk to this person? How do I talk to the other person, the other department or whatever? She'd be helpful, but she wasn't being pushy or like forceful or whatever, which I just thought was super cool and really good, like modeling a good organizer. So just like props, just want to say on the air, like props to Sophia. So
That's great, right? And I misquoted her title. She's secretary treasurer of the union. But I have every confidence in her, and she's leading a lot of the efforts down here in Orange County, and it's been so exciting, really, the efforts and the success we've had in Orange County, because the old guard doesn't make sense to the workers there, the residents there. People understand. We talked at the top of the hour about mental health patients, people with mental illness having been shot by the police. And there was a very famous case in Anaheim, I believe. And just the immigrant communities that are very present in Orange County, and the vision, the change that's going on. And that's where I think we have a lot of opportunity for growth. So one of the things that we were talking about is SEIU is in some hospitals, but there are many, many private sector hospitals that are not organized. They have no union at all. So, that's why we're trying to organize unions. But as you just said, Max, people have to organize themselves, in the end. They have to be given tools. But as Jackie said, there's this, when people feel like they're not in a position of power in the organization, and a labor union concept comes along, well, this can transform us in 3 months.
Oh,
and
my God.
What are some of the gains you've gotten, Jackie, with NUHW?
Yeah.
Please tell us.
We have a job. We have raises. We feel supported. We've got folks. They reinstated pensions for folks. Yeah. I know.
They reinstated pensions. Will you repeat that?
Right?
What kind of pension is it, too? What kind of pension is it?
Not a crappy
It's a good pension, right? Not one of those.
Well, we're here. The biggest benefit is we get to serve the community. Like, it's really so many big wins, I think.
And I know I'm actually just noticed the time, so we should probably close it out soonish. But I wanted to also ask, since there unfortunately still is a lot of skepticism by a significant enough part of the population, skepticism or even hostility toward unions, which in a campaign you have to run to, or you run into, and you have to try to work around. What would y'all say with any listeners that are thinking like, I'd like to join a union, but I don't know, I got to pay dues, and like, what do I really get out of it? And all those kinds of essentially talking points they probably got from management at some point. But what do you have to say to those kinds of listeners and just workers out there in general who are skeptical or have a negative view of unions?
Okay. Well, one of the there is a really good article. I think it's some type of professional administrative associations union called "Why Does a Professional Need a Union?" And that was one of the first pieces I used to help people understand it. First of all, the workers of Kaiser Permanente, over 70% of the workers in Kaiser are union. So union is a big part of the worker of the success of Kaiser Permanente. Kaiser itself will say, when it has its enlightened moments, it will say it would have never survived without the labor movement and labor unions, because it was a threat to regular medicine, right? Because it was a managed care. It was but this idea of why does a professional need a union? And I think we can just look at the teachers' unions. Mm-hmm. What an amazing story. What a story. Because people were pushed to the brink with corporate greed and injustice. They were pushed to the brink, And whether it's the West Virginia teachers, I remember a West Virginia teacher saying at a conference that when they started basically incentivizing me to lose weight, in other words, like putting a tax on my fat, that's what I took to the streets. Because these type of incentives that were enticed in the healthcare benefit package would have, if you lose weight or exercise, you get $500 off your premium during the year. But it was this really intrusive aspect of our own lives. So the teachers' unions, I think, are a great example of, they stood up because they knew that children weren't being educated with the tools they were given. Too many people in the classroom. And then you're going to charge me this much for my health care?
Yeah.
I don't even have money left for groceries. In fact, some of our workers at one of the top hospitals out here in Southern California, there's the University of Southern California, which is a very top university. The workers at some of the hospitals of USC were making such low wages that they had to go and recycle and be on food stamps and CalFresh. So when you see that you are not treated fairly, and that by joining with others, you can actually, like Jackie said, get all these benefits or be part of a movement. I think that individuals understand that this is bigger than ourselves, and that is transform. I use the word transform, but it's healing. It's also healing because we have connection, right? Aren't we wanting connection? So, and as a person of faith, it also is something that really does do justice in this world. So I also see that you allow yourself to really help those that cannot be helping themselves, and the hope for a better world. So it's also another way to instill hope. So that's another reason why you can sell. It's a hard work, but you become an activist. You just don't give up.
It also reverses a political trend that I remember reading about explicitly, that the Clintons decided they were going to cut back in order to cut taxes on the people that were funding their campaigns. And so they decided, okay, let's make the teachers the fall guys and fall girls. And so they started talking about how teachers get away with the whole summer off and they're lazy and all that. And after a while, and those views turned into legislation which impoverished the teachers and denied them their supplies and saw them as moochers. And it took these wildcat strikes for teachers to say, enough, we're doing important work and we need recognition. And Lee Carter, who's a socialist, elected again and again in West Virginia, champions that. So it started a whole progressive possibility there, which is so important, because they said, no, we stand for people's welfare and for a chance for their children. So what you're doing has reverberations and ramifications throughout the country. So important.
What I hear too, and what you're saying, Elizabeth, is that unionism, like union involvement, union activism, it's about connectivity and kind of nurturing and care, which is something that I think some of the older school stereotypes, like the sort of the bosses trickle down talking points. Oh, well, they're greedy. The union bosses just want your dues money. You workers are greedy. You're greedy, asking for more stuff from us, right? Like and I know in the counter campaigns always say that stuff, but you're actually saying that we're trying to take care of each other together, and we're trying to fight identifiable forces when they do appear, whether it's this layer of management or way up top, or maybe it's actually the state that's not forking over enough money to, whatever programs in the public schools or whatever, that we're going to unify together to be able to take care of each other. And whether it's the kids in the schools or the patients in the hospitals, we're going to do whatever we can which often does result in withholding our labor, saying, look, we're gonna take away what matters to you, which is we're not going to actually show up tomorrow if you can't actually take care of us and help us take care of each other. So in that way, it's a sort of act of love and humanitarianism, which is funny how they do, they narrate this as the exact opposite sometimes, that labor is like, greedy and opportunistic and all this crap. So it's beautiful that you frame it that way. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think that, with where Jackie works, and Jackie can speak to this, we call it in the union shop, wall to wall, but almost every worker at her hospital is NUHW.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And who earns a new pension these days? I mean,
Right.
Yeah.
Tell us,
like nobody.
tell us, sister.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I think that like you're speaking to your question of like letting folks, the general population know, like, why is this important for folks to be unionized? And I also just want to acknowledge that not all unions are the same, right?
Mm.
So that
Sure.
it's important to ask questions and to challenge things even within your union. I think the reason why we have such a depth of participation at Children's Hospital is because we all feel supported by our union. That it's I remember sitting in a meeting and management was saying something about the union, making some disparaging comments, and one of my coworkers stood up and said, "Hey, we are the union. Like, so when you say these things, like, you're talking about us. This is a democratic union. We all have a voice here."
Yeah.
And I think that's really important.
It is. It
Yeah.
also shows people we can have a voice, whether it's a voice in our union, which is crucial because it's where we spend most of our hours every day, or whether it's a voice in our government. But our voice has to be heard, and that's what democracy is. And in order to get heard, we have to connect with each other because we are what makes it possible for these organizations to function, these hospitals to function.
Yeah.
Our labor, and we have to value it rather than they kind of assuming that in Hillary Clinton's words and in Trump's behavior that those who do the labor in the society are suckers in a basket of deplorables because they're not rich. And it says, oh no, we are what keeps you alive. We are the essential workers, and we need to be valued economically as well as in every other way. It was really powerful.
I mean, I think that is one of the parts of my journey is that in this, I have become a single parent Medicare for all advocate, and we really have to understand how systems across the world are so much more competitive when they have universal health care. And we fall so short. Look at the COVID crisis. So I'm hoping that, others as well as our union will understand and push the new administration and the new era that we're about to embark on with the type of leaders we've elected, that to really understand that this is a major piece for the health of the economy, but also, the humanity of our people.
That's so important because, look, we have two parties that are capitalist parties representing different tendencies of capitalist employers. And we've just elected, and by a huge landslide, I'm sure they stole many, many votes, and therefore we're very confident they won, so that Biden actually won by more than is apparent. But I think that now those people who elected Biden, the progressives and the people of color, have to say, okay, now you have to serve us. And if you don't, we'll start a socialist party or an alternative because we we are the voice, we are the power, we are the mass of people, we are the essentials.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what's coming up now. And you're really part of this surge, not in the illness, but in the cure, which is very exciting, really inspiring what you're
Nice.
doing.
Well, there's something really beautiful about unions in that you can start from a point of like really seemingly small grievances, like management won't put decaf coffee in the break room, man. Like that sucks. Like it actually can be something that small, or it can be as big as like, we need a massive general strike to get Medicare for all, So like, whether it's Biden or Trump or like Governor Newsom or the mayor of your city or like a middle manager that's just, I don't know, kind of pervy and weird or something. And like, you need the grievance forms aren't working. I do think that it's a beautiful, unions are essentially, they're like a tool and like a social club and all these things kind of put together. And, it is a really good moment right now to think about like with the new transition, if Biden, we'll see, right? Like what happens, but that the more unified and bold labor may be able to make or break whether or not this administration actually does the right thing, right? Like if he goes against campaign promises, or he says, never mind with the student loan debt, you know what, let's just peel back Obamacare. We won't even let people have the choice of like buying healthcare off the private market, even though that was a crappy decision to begin with. But like, if he starts to screw up like really noticeably, labor gets together and says, hey, let's make some noise.
Yes.
Which has just always resulted in good things historically. You can't ignore a strike.
No,
like
you can't ignore the people. And one of the things that this horrible, unchecked pandemic has shown us is who's essential. The stock market is not essential. The people who provide care are essential. Care and food, those are essential. Not people who are trading stocks. They are not essential at all. And so we've gotten a sense of our own importance here, which we could continue to assert in a militant way. And I think it's a great time to do it. And you are an inspiration in that process.
Yeah. Do y'all have any kind of closing statements, like, plugs for the union or just general stuff you want to say before we go?
Huge plugs for the union, I would say. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
Hello. Yeah, I don't even know where to start, but it feels like so important to be a part of a democratic union. I've learned so much and feel so supported. It's really exciting.
It is. It's so exciting to us to hear you.
Yeah, I mean, we like as you say in the union business, like the union raise all boats. So we hope that therapists that are in various settings, mental health workers in various settings, can understand why coming together will help create better working conditions for them. And so the capitalist intrusion into our lives as therapists will be, there'll be some type of countering weight because whether it's mental health apps or robots that are going to take away our business, we have to understand that AI, artificial intelligence, these kinds of things are very much a part of someone's making money off it, and they're looking at making mental health more of a service that's not personal and unique and one-on-one and the heart of healing. So that is something I think that the union will have a role in. And anyone that's listening that's a mental health professional, please reach out to us at National Union of Healthcare Workers, because we're interested in talking with you.
Wonderful.
And where is that? Just something people should Google or whatever? National Union of Healthcare Workers? Is there a website or something?
Yeah, it's .org, NUHW.org.
Okay, awesome. And we'll put the links in the little notes in the podcast episode too. So, man, well, I'm so inspired hearing from both of you. I mean, Jackie, the story about like going from it being this like destitute situation to all the way to like good jobs, benefits, pensions is like this like crazy like unicorn magical
Anything's
situation.
possible. Anything's possible.
Yeah, it is
I know, right?
inspiring.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you guys.
Thank you for having us on.
By the way, listeners, if you have enjoyed anything you've heard Harriet say in this program, you will definitely enjoy Capitalism Hits Home, which is a solo program that Harriet does through Democracy at Work, which is a worker-owned cooperative that produces other great programs such as Economic Update with Richard Wolff and the Anti-Capitalist Chronicles with David Harvey. I can't recommend enough that everyone also listen to Capitalism Hits Home if you enjoy It's Not Just in Your Head.
Capitalism Hits Home is a sort of broader overhead view. It explores the way that capitalism shapes our personal lives, our psyches, our relationships, our families, and it looks particularly at the sea change in American personal life as all Americans, but the top 10 or 20% of Americans, have our security and our chance for a future become as precarious as it always was for minorities and families headed by women. It's not just in your head, and Capitalism Hits Home are definitely complementary.
And if listeners would like to check out Capitalism Hits Home, Harriet, where should they go to find it?
Either on YouTube or Democracy at Work or on my own website, harrietfraud.com.